João, a 15-year-old boy, has always faced a life marked by difficulties. Raised solely by his mother, he barely knew his father, an absent and distant man. The bond between João and his mother was strong, fueled by her love and determination to provide him with a decent life despite all adversities. João learned early on to be responsible and independent, helping his mother with household chores and working part-time to contribute to expenses. Tragedy struck without warning. João's mother, the woman he loved most in the world, fell ill rapidly and passed away, leaving behind an immense and unbearable void. The pain of loss was overwhelming. João felt alone, lost, unsure how to move forward without his mother's comforting presence. Amidst grief and chaos, João's life was turned upside down when he was sent to live with his father. João's father, David, now lived in a comfortable suburban house, married to Clara and father to two young boys, Noah and Liam, aged 5 and 7. For João, moving into this new house felt like being thrown into a strange world. He had no emotional ties with these people, and felt like an outsider in what should have been his new home. David, who had never shown interest in being a father, seemed uncomfortable with the presence of his teenage son. João tried to adapt. Amidst a whirlwind of emotions, he found some relief in saving up his work money to buy an Xbox. The console meant more than just a form of entertainment. It symbolized his independence, an escape from harsh reality, and a connection to happier times he had with his mother. Every moment spent playing was a break from grief and mourning, a small space of joy amidst suffering. But tranquility didn't last. Noah and Liam, curious and full of energy, discovered João's Xbox and began using it carelessly. One of the controllers was damaged, an incident the boys saw as trivial, but for João, it was the last straw. He felt disrespected, his only meaningful possession treated like any cheap toy. Anger and frustration grew inside him, mixed with the pain of feeling that nobody in that house understood or respected his losses and needs. When David and Clara demanded that he put the Xbox in the living room for everyone to use, João felt like an invisible line had been crossed. It wasn't just about a console, it reflected how he felt undervalued and ignored. In an act of desperation and self-assertion, he sold the Xbox. He would rather have nothing than see something so important to him constantly violated. The sale of the Xbox caused an earthquake in the family dynamics. João, already fragile and emotionally shaken, found himself at the center of intense conflict. He felt that his voice, his feelings, and his pain were constantly overlooked by a father who had never been there, and a stepmother he barely knew. João's new life, already marked by loss and upheaval, seemed to become an emotional battleground where he struggled to be seen, heard, and respected. The atmosphere in David and Clara's house was tense. Every move João made was carefully observed, and the silence between him and his father was heavy with unspoken things. Noah and Liam, not understanding the complexity of the situation, continued to be noisy and carefree children, but each laugh or play of theirs seemed to increase João's isolation. He felt more and more like a stranger in that house, as if he belonged to a completely different world. João tried to retreat to his room, the only place where he still felt some control over his life. But the tension was palpable. Clara, trying to mediate the situation, sought João out to talk. She entered the room with a look of genuine concern, but also uncertainty. Clara was clearly not accustomed to dealing with teenagers, especially one who was going through such deep grief. "João, we need to talk," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "I'm so sorry about all of this. I didn't know about you until recently. I want to help, but we need to find a way to live together." João looked at her, his expression a mix of pain and distrust. He knew Clara was trying, but he also knew she couldn't understand what he was feeling. And her effort, though well-intentioned, seemed insufficient to bridge the distance he felt from everyone else. "It's not fair," João murmured, his voice breaking. "I've lost everything. My mom, my home, and now the only piece of happiness I had. They don't understand what it means to me." Clara nodded, visibly moved but determined to resolve the situation. "I know it's hard, João. I promise we'll figure this out. I'll buy a Nintendo Switch for Noah and Liam, and if you want, I can chip in for a new Xbox for you." Clara's offer was generous, but João felt accepting it would be giving in. He shook his head, eyes filled with tears he stubbornly tried to hold back. "It's not about the Xbox. It's about respect. About understanding that I need something that's just mine, something to help me cope with all of this." The conflict reached its peak when David, frustrated by João's resistance, posted a message on social media. He wrote about how Juwon should be grateful for being taken in, making it clear he never wanted children and never planned to charge Juwon rent, but he at least expected him to share the PS5. Juwon came across the post and, as he read it, felt like the ground had been pulled from under him. His father's words were like daggers, each one hitting a painful and sensitive spot. He already knew he wasn't wanted, but seeing it publicly exposed was devastating. Anger and sadness mixed within Juwon. He locked himself in his room, unable to face his father after reading that. Tears finally fell, freely and bitterly. The boy who had already lost so much now felt he had lost any chance of a real family. He felt betrayed in a way words couldn't describe. The pain of being rejected by the one who should protect him was unbearable. The onlooker could feel the weight of Juwon's pain, his silent struggle to find a place in a world that seemed to constantly push him away. The tension was palpable, and the looming question was, how could he overcome yet another deep wound? Juwon spent that sleepless night tossing and turning, reliving every word of his father's social media post. Each sentence was like an echo, resonating in the emptiness of his heart. When he finally emerged from his room, his eyes were red and swollen, but his determination had hardened. He needed answers. He needed to confront the man who should have been his father. At breakfast, the atmosphere was tense. Clara tried to initiate casual conversation, but the tension was palpable. Feeling the weight of David's gaze upon him, Juwon finally broke the silence. "Why did you do that?" Juwon asked, his voice trembling yet filled with desperate determination. "Why did you have to post that about me?" David sighed, placing his coffee cup on the table. "Juwon, I was frustrated. You need to understand that we're all trying to adjust. It's not easy for anyone." "Not easy for anyone?" Juwon repeated, incredulous. "You think this is easy for me? Losing my mom, my home, and now finding out that my own father never wanted me?" Clara tried to intervene, placing her hand on Juwon's shoulder. "David, maybe we should—" "No, Clara," David interrupted. "Juwon needs to understand that we're all making sacrifices here. I never planned on having you here, but I'm trying. And what about you? You just think about yourself." Those words hit Juwon like a punch to the gut. He felt tears welling up again, but this time he refused to let them fall. "I didn't ask to be here," he said, his voice filled with pain and anger. "I just want some respect, some understanding." David abruptly stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Respect? Understanding? And what are you doing for this family, Juwon? You lock yourself in your room, refuse to share, and expect all of us to just accept that." Clara, seeing the situation deteriorate, tried once more to calm tempers. "Please, both of you, let's try to sort this out without yelling." Feeling cornered, Juwon ran out of the room, ignoring Clara's calls. He needed air, space, anything but that house filled with expectations and resentments. He walked to the nearest park, where he sat on a bench and finally let the tears flow freely. The park was empty, and Juwon felt even more alone. As he sat there, his phone vibrated. It was a message from a cousin, someone he barely knew but who apparently had seen his father's post. The message was short, but full of solidarity. "Juwon, we're here for you. Don't let this bring you down. You're strong." The words of support, though from an almost stranger, brought Juwon some comfort. He replied with thanks and sat there, looking out at the horizon, trying to gather strength to face the next challenge. The family meeting Clara had suggested was scheduled for that afternoon. Juwon knew it would be difficult, painful even, but he also knew he needed to be heard. When he returned home, he found Clara waiting for him at the door. "Juwon, everyone is here, your uncles, cousins, they've come to help us sort this out." Juwon entered, feeling the weight of expectations but also a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he would find some support, some validation for his pain. The room was filled with familiar and unfamiliar faces, all turned towards him and his father. The tension was palpable, but there was a chance, finally, that he might be heard. During the meeting, Juwon's uncles and cousins spoke up. They harshly criticized David's actions, reminding him of his responsibilities as a father. Juwon, his voice still shaky, told his side of the story, exposing his pain and his need for respect. The eyes of his relatives filled with compassion, and one by one they expressed their support for Juwon. Confronted by his family, David seemed torn between anger and shame. Clara, ever the mediator, suggested they all seek professional help, that they have more open conversations about their feelings. It was a moment of revelations and raw emotions, but also of a possible fresh start. João, though still wounded, began to feel he wasn't as alone as he had thought. The meeting ended with many issues unresolved, but for the first time in a long while, he saw a light at the end of the tunnel. He knew the journey ahead would be long and difficult, but now he had the support of his extended family to help him face each challenge. The family meeting had ended, but its impact reverberated throughout the house. João felt exhausted, emotionally drained, but there was a small flame of hope burning inside him. He knew the struggle was far from over, but at least now he had allies. The tension between him and David, however, remained unchanged. That night, João was in his room, reflecting on everything that had transpired. The unexpected support from his relatives brought some relief, but he still felt lost. He wondered if he would ever truly feel like a part of that family. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. Every laughter from the young boys a painful reminder of his own stolen childhood and his mother's absence. Suddenly, a gentle knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Clara with a concerned and determined look. "João, can we talk?" He nodded, moving to make space for her to enter. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, sighing before she began. "João, I know things are really tough right now, but I want you to know that we're all trying to do better. Today was a big step." João looked at her, pain and confusion clear in his eyes. "But I still feel so alone, Clara. I still feel like my father will never truly accept me." Clara held his hand, squeezing it gently. "I understand, João, and that's why we need to keep talking, trying to understand each other. Your father is struggling with a lot too, and maybe he doesn't know how to handle all of this. But I'm here for you, and we'll work on this together." Clara's words were a small comfort, but João still felt a heavy sadness. He wanted to believe things could get better, but the path ahead seemed so long and uncertain. That night, he fell asleep with a heavy heart, yet with a glimmer of hope. In the following days, things began to change slowly. Clara arranged a family therapy session, something initially met with resistance from David, but he eventually agreed, albeit reluctantly. The first session was tense, filled with awkward silences and unspoken words. The therapist, a woman with a calm voice and understanding gaze, encouraged each of them to speak about their feelings. David, initially hesitant, eventually revealed his own insecurities and frustrations. He talked about the burden of being a father he never planned to be, about the fear of failing João, and about the difficulty of dealing with guilt and anger. It was the first time João saw his father vulnerable, and it touched him deeply, though the pain was still there. João, in turn, spoke about the loss of his mother, about feeling abandoned, and about the need to have something that was just his own, something to help him cope with the pain. He cried, and for the first time, felt that his tears were truly seen and understood. The therapy session didn't solve everything, but it was a beginning. After the session, David approached João. "I'm not perfect, João, and I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but I want to try to be a better father to you, if you'll give me that chance." João looked at his father, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. There was still a lot of pain and distrust, but he nodded. "I want to try too." The following weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. There were moments of progress and moments of setbacks, but slowly, the family dynamic began to change. Clara continued to be the pillar of support, always encouraging communication and understanding. There was one particular night that marked a significant step forward. Clara suggested a family game night, something João initially hesitated to join. But seeing Noah and Liam so excited, he decided to give it a chance. The house was filled with laughter and friendly competition. David, trying to connect with João, suggested they play together on the PS5. João hesitated, but eventually agreed. During that game, something unexpected happened. David, for the first time, praised João's skill, and they laughed together over a silly mistake David made. It was a small but meaningful moment. A bridge was being built, brick by brick. João still had a long way to go, and he knew the pain of losing his mother would never completely fade away. But he began to see a possibility of finding a new kind of family, of building new memories, and maybe one day, feeling like he truly belonged somewhere. The journey was uncertain, full of challenges, but for the first time in a long while, João had hope for a better future. As the days passed, João began to feel more comfortable in David and Clara's home. Family therapy had been a crucial turning point, paving the way for more honest conversations and genuine moments of connection between him and his father. There were still emotional obstacles to overcome, but João was determined to keep moving forward. One afternoon, while in the backyard helping Noah and Liam build a treehouse, João realized he was starting to feel less like a stranger in that house. The boys looked at him with admiration and curiosity, asking about his gaming skills and listening attentively as he told stories about his mother and the happy times they had together. David was also making an effort. He spent more time talking with João, trying to understand his interests and concerns. They still had disagreements at times, especially when it came to boundaries and expectations. But now there was a mutual sense of respect slowly forming. Clara continued to be the glue that held everyone together. Her patience and compassion were unwavering, and she constantly reminded everyone about the importance of being kind to each other and giving space for each person to express their emotions. One evening during dinner, David suggested a family trip to the lake for the weekend. João looked at him, surprised by the proposal. A lake? As a family? David nodded, a hesitant smile on his lips. Yes, I know it's a big step, but I think it would be good for all of us. We can fish, hike, just relax together. João looked around the table, seeing the hopeful looks from Noah and Liam and Clara's encouraging smile. He thought about it for a moment, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. A family trip was something he had never experienced before, something his mother had always dreamed of doing with him. I think it would be nice, João finally said, his voice a bit uncertain. I would like to try. David nodded, gratitude evident in his eyes. Great, let's plan it then. That night, João lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind filled with thoughts. He knew the trip would be a test for all of them, a chance to build new memories together. He wondered if he would be able to truly leave the past behind, if he would be able to forgive his father completely for everything that had happened. The next day, while helping Clara pack items for the trip, João felt a ray of hope warming his heart. Perhaps through these shared moments and new experiences, he could finally find the peace he had been seeking. The trip was approaching quickly, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings and the possibility of healing for a family that had been fractured and wounded, but was now slowly rebuilding. A trip to the lake came faster than João expected. In the days leading up to their departure, he felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. It was the first time he would be traveling with David, Clara, and the boys as a family. The road to the lake was long and winding, but the atmosphere inside the car was light and filled with anticipation. Noah and Liam were excited, asking non-stop about what they would find at the lake. João smiled at the purity of their childlike curiosity, reminiscing about how he used to be at their age. He found himself eager to create new memories, perhaps to replace the old ones with something more positive and shared. David drove with concentration, occasionally glancing at João in the rearview mirror. It seemed as though he too was anxious, trying to get everything right this time. Clara, beside him, occasionally squeezed João's hand, a silent gesture of support that he deeply appreciated. When they finally arrived at the lake, the scenery was breathtaking. Tall trees surrounded the calm blue water, reflecting the late afternoon sun. They set up camp in a secluded spot, with a fire pit that would be lit later in the evening. As the afternoon progressed, they explored the surroundings, finding hiking trails and small hidden coves along the shore. Noah and Liam ran around excitedly, fascinated by the nature around them. João, watching the boys, felt a tightness in his chest. He wondered what it would have been like if his mother were still alive, if they could have done something like this together. During dinner around the campfire, the atmosphere was serene. Clara told funny stories from when David was a child, making everyone laugh, including João. It was a rare moment of lightness, where the worries of everyday life seemed distant and insignificant. At night, as the sky filled with stars, João wandered away from the group for a bit. He walked to the edge of the lake, bare feet on the cool sand. The calm waters reflected the moon's glow, creating a landscape of peace and tranquility. He wondered if his mother could see this now, if she was somewhere watching. Her absence still hurt, but being there, with this new family, brought a sense of solace. He felt part of something larger, part of a healing journey that was just beginning. Suddenly, David appeared beside him. He didn't say anything, just joined João in silently watching the lake. The full moon cast gentle shadows on their faces, highlighting lines of worry and determination. João looked at his father, seeing him in a new light, more human, more vulnerable. "Thank you for this, Dad," João finally said, his voice low and filled with emotion. "For bringing me here." David looked at him, eyes moist. "I know I haven't fixed everything, João, but I'm trying. I want you to know that." João nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude and hope wash over him. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, full of ups and downs, but now he had something he didn't have before, a family that was fighting alongside him. They stood there for a long time, father and son, sharing a moment of silence that spoke more than words ever could. The lake remained calm under the moonlight, and João felt grateful to be there, to have the chance to start anew, to build something true and meaningful. That night, as they walked back to the campsite, João felt lighter than he had in months. He knew there was still much work to be done, but now he was certain he wasn't alone in this journey. And with each passing day, he felt his mother was looking out for him, guiding him through the shadows toward the light. The morning after the night at the lake, João woke up to the gentle sound of birds singing and the fresh scent of the surrounding forest. He emerged from the tent and saw Noah and Liam already awake, running along the lakeshore and playing as if there were no tomorrow. Clara was preparing breakfast over the campfire, with David by her side, helping with the pots. João approached slowly, still taking in the morning's tranquility. Clara smiled at him when she saw him. "Good morning, sleepyhead. I thought you were going to sleep until noon." João chuckled, feeling a lightness in his heart that he hadn't felt in a long time. "I guess the nature here is quite convincing." David came closer, placing a hand on João's shoulder. "I hope you're enjoying yourself, son." João looked at him, seeing concern and hope in his father's eyes. "I'm enjoying it, Dad. It's nice to be here." During breakfast, they planned the day together. They decided to explore more of the area, take a hike to a nearby waterfall, and perhaps try a bit of fishing in the lake. Noah and Liam were full of energy, making elaborate plans about building a new treehouse after breakfast. During the hike to the waterfall, João found himself talking more with David. They discussed simple things like the trail they were on and the birds they spotted along the way, but it was the first time they talked like this, father and son, without the tension that had always been present before. When they arrived at the waterfall, João was amazed by its beauty. The water fell into a clear, deep pool, creating a gentle and soothing sound. He sat on the rocks beside his father, gazing at the flowing water. "It's beautiful here," João said softly. David nodded. "Yes, it is. I used to come here when I was a child with my parents. It's a special place." João looked at him, thoughtful. "Have you ever been here with Mom?" David hesitated for a moment before replying. "Not exactly here, but we used to camp together, explore new places. She loved nature." João nodded, gazing at the water. "I miss her every day." David placed a hand on João's shoulder, comforting him. "I know, son. I miss her too." They sat there for a while, just feeling the tranquility of the place. It was a moment of silent connection, where words were less important than simply being there for each other. In the late afternoon, they returned to the campsite, tired but happy. Clara was preparing dinner while Noah and Liam played in the sand by the lake. João felt a familiar warmth within him, a sense of belonging that he had never expected to find so soon. During dinner around the campfire, João looked around at his new family. He saw Clara's smile, David's serene expression, and the innocent joy on Noah and Liam's faces. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he should be. That night, as he settled into his tent, João looked up at the stars above. He thought about the journey he had been on, the challenges and victories, the tears shed, and the smiles shared. And even though he knew the road ahead would still be challenging, he felt a deep gratitude for everything he had experienced so far. As he fell asleep under the starry sky, João knew that the past would still haunt him from time to time, but he had found something stronger than any pain. He had found love and acceptance in a new family, a family willing to fight for him, just as he was willing to fight for them. And so, with a heart full of hope and gratitude, João fell asleep. knowing that the dawn would bring new possibilities and a future he had never imagined possible.